Hey guys, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. This is your host Thomas Tyree from On the Hot Podcast. Today, this is going to be the Combat Series episode number 4 today, coming out on all 4 of our platforms, our Instagram account, our Facebook account, our YouTube account, and our Apple Podcast account. So let's go ahead and dive into episode number 4 of the Combat Series. And starting off with the UFC, should UFC fighters be paid more than what they actually are in today's MMA world? So to me, yes, UFC fighters deserve to be paid way more than what they are being paid today in the sport of MMA inside the UFC organization. Dana White has to be held responsible for paying his fighters more money than what they deserve, or the money that they truly deserve compared to the money that they're making right now in the UFC. To me, out of all the sports in the world, every sport is dangerous. You could put it all on the line in each respective sport. To me, the most dangerous sports that come to my mind is boxing and football. But to me, MMA is the most dangerous sport for several reasons. You can punch your opponent. You can knock your opponent out cold via a punch to the face, a punch to the temple, a punch to the jaw. Anything that connects with your fist, you can knock your opponent out. You can also knock your opponent out with a lethal leg kick. You can kick your opponent in the midsection. You can kick them in their legs. You can kick them anywhere you want in the head. It's scary. You can choke your opponents out in an octagon inside the inside an MMA ring. You can submit your opponents. You can even break one of your opponent's bones. MMA is the most dangerous sport out there, in my opinion, in the sports world today. And UFC fighters should be taken care of better than what they are. Dana White needs to be held responsible. And as of 2023, in the United States, the average American is currently making $6,228 a month. That's the American's a monthly salary right now in the year 2023. A UFC fighter on the UFC preliminary cards makes $10,000 to fight and $10,000 bonus if they win the fight. But you can get the fighter, but you have to do the math on it. The fighter has to, when they get that win, when they get paid to get in the ring, they have to sacrifice their money that they won. They have to pay their gym fees. They have to pay their nutritionists. They have to pay their trainers. And when you do the math on that, a majority of the money that respective UFC fighter made, it's going down the drain because they have big bills to pay. And it's very unfortunate that the fighters really can't enjoy the money. And I'm going to get to that point in a few moments. But a prime example of how UFC fighters are being underpaid. Last year, in the calendar year 2022, we saw one of the biggest UFC fights in the lightweight division when Charles Oliveira took on Nagachi, which was one of the biggest UFC fights last year. And with the fight, with all the money that was earned, with the fight bonus, purse money, and sponsorships, both respective fighters walked away with a total of $1.5 million combined. And that's just a crime. Charles Oliveira is one of the biggest draws of UFC. Nagachi has been one of the biggest draws in the lightweight division. How do you mean to tell me when they first meet for the first time in the octagon last year, they both, when all this is said and done, when all the math adds up, they both only walk away with a combined total of $1.5 million. That's a crime. Dana White needs to take better care of his fighters. And this is the reason why Francis Ngannou walked out of the UFC organization. One of the best heavyweight draws that the UFC has seen in so long. His last fight came in the UFC last year in early 2022 when he fought Ghana in the UFC on a UFC pay-per-view for the heavyweight title. And in that fight, Francis Ngannou only made $600,000 against Ghana. That is, you can't make this stuff up at how Dana White is paying his respective UFC fighters. And this is the reason why UFC fighters say they've ran out of money when they're at the end of their careers. This is why you see former UFC fighters, UFC employees make the jump from MMA to the sport of boxing when they're in their 40s. Taking notes and examples of this is Anderson Silva, a Tyron Woodley, and now we're seeing Nate Diaz do it. They all have said on record that they have been underpaid by Dana White, and they made the shift from MMA to boxing to fight a up and coming YouTube star, somebody who was a YouTube star once upon a time, in Jake Paul. And Jake Paul, whether you guys want to believe it or not, he's giving them their biggest payday of their respective careers. Even in their days of UFC, they're making a bigger bag fighting Jake Paul in a boxing ring. And it's mind-blowing to me when you think about that they put their lives on the line, their bodies on the line, how much they sacrifice to be in that position, to be at the top of the sport. And they're being, a lot of guys are being underpaid in the UFC. And the UFC is worth $12.3 billion. Dana White makes $20 million per year and has a net worth of over $500 million. So he's a genius. He's a big mastermind. He's a billionaire. Needs to take care of his fighters. You got the money. You got the funds to do it. Why not? I know how Dana White rolls. He's said it on several podcasts. He said on several interviews that he refuses to overpay his fighters. He says, yes, in boxing, boxers are overpaid, and yes, that is true. But when you have the top names at your division, in your organization, that are big time draws, that have been giving you the money the money that you get to put in your pocket at the end of the day, I think it's only fair that you pay these respective fighters even more. And there's only been 2 guys that have made more than $10 million in career earnings in their UFC careers in UFC history since the takeover of Dana White, and that's Conor McGregor and Khabib. And nobody else has earned that range more than those 2 respective fighters. Dana White needs to take better care of his fighters, and they deserve to be paid more. But those are my thoughts on if UFC fighters should be paid more, or should they keep their current salary of what they are currently being paid by Dana White.